Sherlock Holmes and the Man Who Killed Sherlock Holmes, an Honoring Audiobooks original story from the Reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D. Chapter 1, The Playwright's Demise. It was on a wind-raked evening in late November of 1899 that I first became aware of the curious business which would, in time, come to be known as the affair of the final script. That day had passed without incident, gray skies heavy with sleet, horse-drawn carriages skating precariously over the cobbled streets of Baker Street, and Londoners bustling by in scarves and greatcoats, heads bent against the freezing rain. I had returned home early from my surgery, disheartened by the season's illnesses and the melancholy they brought in their wake. At precisely 6:30, I arrived at 221B Baker Street, stamped the slush from my boots, and handed my hat to Mrs. Hudson, who looked more careworn than usual. "Is Mr. Holmes in?" I inquired. "He's been in his room all afternoon," said she, with a glance toward the stairwell. "Came back with ink on his cuffs and a look I didn't like. Be careful, doctor." I ascended the stairs with the slow deliberation of one well acquainted with my friend's mercurial moods. Sherlock Holmes, for all his intellectual brilliance, could fall prey to periods of manic energy followed by near catatonic silence. I hoped this was not to be one of the latter. I found him sprawled upon the settee in his dressing gown, long legs draped over the armrest, a cigarette burning to ash in his fingers. The room reeked of shag tobacco and ink, for the desk in the corner bore the marks of a recent literary siege, crumpled papers, a dry inkwell, and a tangle of notes in Holmes's spidery hand. "Ah, Watson," he murmured, not rising. "Just in time. I require your judgment on a matter most peculiar." "You look as if you've spent the day in war with the muse," I said, seating myself beside the fire. "Has your violin offended you again?" "No, nothing so trivial," Holmes replied, gesturing toward the fireplace where a folded envelope, slightly singed at the edges, lay atop the grate. "It arrived this morning. No signature. Delivered by hand." I retrieved the envelope, noting its fine vellum texture and the faint watermark of the Lyceum Theatre, a detail Holmes no doubt had already observed. Inside was a single typewritten page. I read aloud. Act 3, Scene 2. The great detective confronts his final nemesis not on the moors, nor at Reichenbach, but within the very walls of his sanctuary. There, deceived by logic, betrayed by trust, Sherlock Holmes meets the end he has long evaded. The instrument? Not a revolver, not poison, but a sharpened quill, buried deep in the carotid artery as he reaches for the very script that seals his doom, murdered by his own myth. I looked up. Holmes's face was unreadable, his eyes fixed on the ceiling with the detached fascination of an astronomer contemplating stars. "Some theater critic's idea of irony?" I ventured. "Not quite," said Holmes. "Turn the page." There was a second page, one I had not noticed, tucked behind the first like a shadow waiting for light. It was a cast list. At the top, typed in capital letters, was the title, The Death of Sherlock Holmes, a Tragedy in 5 Acts. Beneath it, a listing of dramatis personae. Among them, Sherlock Holmes, a consulting detective, Dr. John H. Watson, his loyal biographer, Miss Evelyn Templar, a lady of letters, Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard, Augustus Vollum, a playwright, and finally in bold, the murderer, Sherlock Holmes. I stared at Holmes. "Someone's written your death as a stage drama?" He nodded slowly. "And not just any drama, a 5-act tragedy, quite methodically constructed. This excerpt is the 3rd act, the turning point, as it were." I glanced again at the first page. "Murdered with a quill? In this very room? It's absurd." "Absurd, yes, but not without its artistry," Holmes said. "Note the manner of death. Symbolic, metafictional, a character slain by his own narrative." I frowned. "You think the author meant it as a message?" "I think," Holmes said, rising at last and pacing to the window, "that someone wishes me not merely dead, but unwritten." We stood in silence for a moment, watching snow accumulate on the windowsill. The room felt colder for it. Then came the knock. 3 precise raps, too measured for a constable, too urgent for a social caller. Mrs. Hudson's voice called faintly from below. "Mr. Holmes! Inspector Lestrade is here to see you!" "Enter, Lestrade!" Holmes barked. The inspector burst in a moment later, his hat still dusted with sleet, cheeks red from the cold. He carried a bundle beneath his arm. "Holmes! Dr. Watson! I hope I don't intrude." "Not at all, Lestrade," Holmes said, waving him in. "What brings you here on a night fit only for madmen and magistrates?" Lestrade's brow furrowed. A murder, Holmes. Theatrical sort. Damnedest thing I've seen. Holmes exchanged a glance with me, then motioned for Lestrade to sit. Go on. Name of Augustus Vollum? Playwright. You've heard of him? Holmes's brow lifted a fraction. Author of The Lady in Sable, The Minister's Mask, and several other melodramatic contrivances, moderately popular with the masses. Go on. Found dead this afternoon in his study. Locked room. Gas lamps snuffed. Curtains drawn. And here's the devil of it. Lestrade reached into his bundle and removed a sheaf of typewritten pages, stained at the edges. He handed them to Holmes. Found this on his desk. Play manuscript. Title, The Death of Sherlock Holmes. He was writing your murder. Holmes took the pages with surgical delicacy, as if fearing contagion. He flipped through them rapidly, then stopped on a particular line. His eyes narrowed. And how did Mr. Vollum die? Lestrade looked uncomfortable. Puncture wound to the neck. A quill pen, sharpened to a point, buried right here. He gestured at his own carotid, same as described in the script. There was a silence so absolute I could hear the settling of soot in the fireplace. Holmes spoke at last. And I presume the fact that the killer in this script is named as Sherlock Holmes has raised certain complications? Lestrade nodded grimly. There's already talk in the papers. Rumors. The Penny Post has a half-page column titled, Has the Detective Finally Snapped? Scotland Yard knows better, of course, but, well, Holmes, you've made enemies. I've made a reputation, Holmes said sharply. Enemies are merely the residue. Still, Lestrade said, I need you to stay put for a while. This is delicate. I'll handle the press. But if word gets out that the real Sherlock Holmes is investigating the murder of a fictional Sherlock Holmes, things could turn farcical. Holmes gave a dry smile, and we wouldn't want the public to lose faith in their illusions. I could not help myself. Lestrade, is there any evidence to suggest Holmes's involvement? Any fingerprints, witnesses, notes? No, Lestrade admitted, but the theatrical crowd is all in a twist. Vollum had no shortage of rivals, writers, critics, even a few mistresses with motives. But the whole thing feels staged, if you catch my meaning. I do, Holmes said. Tell me, was the body discovered before or after curtain call? Before, Lestrade said. His maid found him around 4, curtains drawn, door locked from the inside. Not a soul could have entered or left without notice. Holmes returned to the manuscript, flipping to the final page, his brow furrowed. Watson, listen to this. He read aloud. Epilogue. The world mourns the passing of a legend, but some say he was never real to begin with, that he was merely a fiction conjured from ink and smoke, a reflection of the age's desire for certainty. And now, with the author dead and the page stained red, the question remains, was it the man who killed Holmes, or Holmes who killed the man? I shivered. Gentlemen, Holmes said, it appears I am now both subject and suspect in a crime that blurs the border between imagination and intent. Lestrade rose. Keep your ear to the ground, Holmes, but don't do anything foolish. I'll have constables posted nearby in case this escalates. As he departed, Holmes turned to me with that glint in his eye I had come to know well. The spark of curiosity lit by danger, the kind that drew him toward fire rather than away from it. Watson, he said, fetch your coat. We're going to the Lyceum. I donned my coat and muffler without protest, my instincts as a physician and longtime companion warning me that Holmes's mind was now a furnace of activity, and I would be a fool to stand in its way. When he entered such a state, cold-eyed, energetic, and maddeningly cryptic, one could do little else but follow and attempt to keep up. The wind outside had grown vicious, tearing at our collars and flinging sleet against our faces as we descended the steps and hailed a cab. Holmes gave the driver an address with the crispness of command. Lyceum Theater. And be quick about it. The cab rocked as we drove, the clip of the horse's hooves muffled by slush and the occasional hiss of steam from the grates. Holmes said little, his gloved fingers steepled beneath his chin and his eyes distant. Only once did he speak, and even then it was more a mutter than a statement. Symbolism, Watson, always the preferred weapon of the theatrical mind. This is no ordinary murder. It is a message dressed in blood and metaphor. I confess, I said, I still struggle to understand why Vollum would pen such a piece. Was it a satire? A criticism? Perhaps neither, Holmes replied. Or both. Vollum was not a man given to subtlety, but he was clever, and he understood the power of narrative. You think he expected it to provoke you? I think he expected it to provoke someone. The Lyceum loomed out of the mist like a half-formed specter, its stone facade lit by sputtering gas lamps, banners for Macbeth hanging limp in the wet wind. A weary doorman, wrapped in a heavy coat and scarf, glanced up as we approached. "Closed for rehearsal," he barked. "We have business inside," Holmes said, flashing a card from his coat pocket with such speed that I failed to see what was written on it. Whatever it was, it cowed the doorman sufficiently to admit us with a grunt and a nod. Inside, the theater was cavernous and half-dark. Scaffolding stood against one wall where some scenery was being hoisted. From the stage came the sharp tap of a director's cane and the echo of a voice delivering Shakespeare with trembling zeal. Holmes moved with purpose, slipping past stagehands and cordage like a phantom, until we stood at the wings, where a tall man in a velvet coat and pince-nez was arguing with an actress in a violet gown. "Excuse me," Holmes said crisply. "You are Mr. Horatio Flint, I presume?" The man turned, startled, and adjusted his spectacles. "Indeed I am. Who's asking?" "Sherlock Holmes. And this is my associate, Dr. John Watson." Flint blinked, then his eyes widened. "Not the Sherlock Holmes? I am told there are few imitators," Holmes said. "Mr. Flint, we come concerning Augustus Vollum." At the name, Flint's expression changed, from curiosity to something between irritation and unease. "A tragedy," he said flatly. "Horrible business." "You knew him well?" "We were collaborators of a sort," Flint said, motioning us away from the stage. He'd written several acts for a new production. Odd fellow. Brilliant, but volatile. Lately, though... He trailed off, guiding us into a small dressing room where the air was close with powder and grease paint. "Yes?" Holmes prompted. "Well, he'd become obsessed," Flint said, lowering his voice. "With you, Mr. Holmes. He said he was writing something that would reshape the myth," his words. Claimed it would be the most subversive piece of theater London had ever seen. Holmes folded his arms. "Did he say why?" "He felt betrayed," Flint said with a sigh. "By fiction. By the idea of the great detective who always solved everything. Vollum had a brother, killed under suspicious circumstances, I believe. Police never found the culprit. After that, he began to hate the notion of infallible deduction. Said it was a dangerous fantasy." "A vendetta," I said. "Of a kind," Flint nodded. "He poured all that bile into his final play." "The one where I am the killer," Holmes said flatly. Flint winced. "Yes, I begged him to reconsider the ending. Told him it would court scandal. But he laughed, said that was the point, that the myth of Holmes had become too powerful and only the character himself could destroy it." Holmes's face darkened. "Did anyone else read the script?" "Several members of the company. His favorite actress, Evelyn Templar, played the female lead. She and Vollum were involved." "Where can we find her?" Holmes asked. "She's likely in her dressing room. I can fetch her if you wish." "Please." As Flint disappeared into the gloom, Holmes turned to me. "You see, Watson? This is no random act of madness. This is theater turned inward, tragedy bleeding into reality. Vollum was writing his own death." A moment later, Evelyn Templar entered. She was a woman of considerable presence, not beautiful in the classical sense, but striking, with coal-black hair pinned severely, a sharp mouth, and the posture of one born to command attention. Her voice, when she spoke, was rich with irony. "So," she said, "the real Sherlock Holmes. I must say you're less dour than Vollum's version." "Miss Templar," Holmes said without flinching, "we have reason to believe that Mr. Vollum's death was premeditated. Not merely a murder, but a statement, one bound tightly to his manuscript." Her eyes flickered. "He did enjoy making statements." "Were you aware of the play's final draft?" "I read it," she said. "It was unorthodox." "You performed in it?" "We had a read-through scheduled for tomorrow. Augustus wanted it staged in secret before making a public debut. He said the world wasn't ready." "For what, precisely?" She smiled coldly. "For the death of certainty." I felt a chill at her words. Holmes, however, seemed pleased. "Thank you," he said. "That will be all, for now." As we left the theater, the wind howled through the narrow alleys like a beast denied its supper. Back in the cab, I turned to Holmes. "You have a theory." "I have the start of one," he said. "A man writes a play depicting the death of a legend, my death no less, and is killed in precisely that manner. The manuscript survives. The suspects are theatrical, dramatic, and possibly complicit. But one fact strikes me above all else, Watson." "What's that?" He looked at me, eyes gleaming. The play describes my death, but the man who dies is the author. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Manuscript. Our return to Baker Street that evening was marked by a rare silence. The fog had thickened, the sort that swallowed gaslight and muffled carriage wheels, wrapping the city in a smothering gray. Inside, Holmes went directly to the fire and began pacing like a restless hound, eyes aglow with the energy of a mind ablaze. I removed my coat, now stiff from the sleet, and poured 2 small glasses of brandy. When I offered one to Holmes, he accepted it absently, taking a sip without breaking stride. "I've seen you restless before," I remarked, "but this is different. You're disturbed." "Not disturbed," Holmes corrected. "Intrigued, possibly even inspired." "Inspired by a murder?" "Not by the murder, Watson, but by the intelligence behind it. Whoever orchestrated this affair is no common cutthroat. They've committed an act not of violence, but of authorship." He paused at the mantel, gesturing toward the manuscript Lestrade had left. "This script is a cipher, Watson. Each line a clue. The death is literal, yes, but it is also theatrical, scripted, staged, executed with literary precision. The killer wants to be read as much as caught." "Then where do we begin?" Holmes tapped his forefinger against the side of his nose. "With the woman, of course. Evelyn Templar." "She seems too obvious," I said, "and too composed." "Precisely. A woman accustomed to performance, capable of reciting grief and innocence in equal measure. Yet her tone tonight, there was a cadence to it. The death of certainty. Those were her words, not volumes." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled open the center drawer of his writing desk. From within, he extracted a slim volume bound in maroon leather, The Theatrical Registry of London, 1899. Flipping rapidly through its pages, he found what he sought and read aloud. "Templar, Evelyn, born 1872 in Scarborough, graduated Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, 1891. Early engagements with the Covent Garden Ensemble. Reputation for emotional versatility, most acclaimed performance as Ophelia, 1895. He closed the book with a snap. A woman well-versed in the language of tragedy. It is no stretch to imagine her aiding in one. "You think she was Volum's accomplice?" "I think she knew him better than she admitted. Whether she helped write the ending or simply chose not to prevent it is yet to be determined." Holmes moved to the manuscript, now spread across the desk like an autopsy report. He lifted the final page delicately, as though afraid to disturb a ghost. "Note the final line, Watson. Was it the man who killed Holmes or Holmes who killed the man?" "Yes," I said. "You read it earlier." "It is more than rhetorical," he murmured. "It is self-incriminating, as if Volum knew what was coming. But surely he didn't write his own death." "Or he did," Holmes said, eyes distant. "At least the scene. Think of it. A man so obsessed with unmaking a myth that he constructs a scenario in which his own death proves the myth's fallibility. He dies to prove Holmes is not above suspicion. But that only works if the death resembles the fiction. It's circular." "And the real question," I said slowly, "is whether someone else took that idea and made it real." Holmes smiled, a flash of teeth in calculation. "Exactly." A sharp rap on the door interrupted our thoughts. Mrs. Hudson called up, breathless. "A letter, Mr. Holmes. No sender. Delivered by a boy in a red cap. Ran off before I could get a name." Holmes was already at the stairwell. Moments later, he returned with a thin envelope sealed in black wax. He broke the seal, read the contents in silence, and passed the note to me. It read, "The second act begins. Curtain rises at midnight. Bring no constables. No name. No address. Just those 10 ominous words." Holmes's expression changed, hunger flashing in his eyes like a wolf catching scent. "We're expected," he said. "Expected where?" I asked. He tapped the bottom of the letter. "There's a watermark. Faint. Turn it in the light." I did as instructed, and there it was, barely visible. "Tavistock and Gray, Stationers to the Crown, King's Court." Holmes nodded. Tavistock Stationery is exclusive to a handful of theatrical agents. One of their clients rents a studio above a disused auction house on Burlington Street. It's been used for secret rehearsals, society duels, even seances. Midnight fits the mood perfectly. "You intend to go?" "Of course. This killer is playing a role, Watson, and I intend to audition." The streets of Mayfair were all but deserted when we arrived at Burlington Street shortly before midnight. Snow whispered along the pavement, falling in gentle, deceitful silence. Above us, gas lamps flickered in sullen halos, and the old auction house stood like a mausoleum, its windows dark, its door unguarded. Holmes checked his watch, then gestured to the door. "It's unlocked," he said. "They want us inside." We entered cautiously. The air was musty with age and disuse. Our footsteps echoed off marble floors and mahogany columns, all remnants of the building's wealthier past. At the far end of the corridor, a faint light flickered. We followed it. The room we entered had once been a gallery. Now it was transformed. Black curtains lined the walls, and in the center of the floor was a makeshift stage, 6 feet wide, lit by a single gas lamp on a chain. Upon the stage stood a tall, narrow writing desk. A single page lay upon it, weighted by a stone. No one else was in the room. Holmes approached the desk and read the page aloud. Act 2, Scene 1. The detective follows the trail left by the author. But in chasing the truth, he enters the story, and once inside, he must abide by its rules. Tonight, he becomes the fiction. "What madness is this?" I whispered. Holmes's eyes scanned the corners of the room. "It is not madness, Watson. It is invitation, or perhaps a trap." At that moment, a noise came from behind the curtain, a rustle, a breath, perhaps a footstep. Holmes drew his revolver, and I did the same. "Who's there?" he called. No answer, but the curtain rippled. Holmes gestured for me to move left while he moved right. We rounded the stage slowly, pistols raised. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, draped in a black cloak. A mask obscured his face, theatrical in style, half comedy, half tragedy. He raised his hands, slowly, mockingly. Holmes did not flinch. "Remove the mask." The figure said nothing. He reached into his cloak, and for a moment I thought he would produce a weapon. But it was only a rose, black, made of velvet and paper. He placed it upon the stage and turned to go. "Stop!" I shouted. Holmes did not shoot. We gave chase, but the figure had vanished into the corridors before we reached the door. We searched the building, but found no sign of him. Only the rose remained, its petals ink-stained and curling at the edges. Back at the desk, Holmes picked up the page again, then turned it over. There was something written on the back in red ink, elegant, careful, theatrical. "You play the role too well, Mr. Holmes, but even you must see. The author is dead. The detective is next." Holmes stood still for a long moment, the letter pressed lightly between his fingers, the crimson ink stark against the creamy paper. His eyes, those piercing orbs I knew so well, were shadowed with something I had never seen before, a quiet gravity. "The author is dead. The detective is next." I swallowed hard. "Holmes, this is a direct threat." "Indeed, Watson, but it is also an invitation, a game extended by an adversary who understands the power of narrative as well as we do." I moved to the window and peered into the London night, the fog swirling in the gaslight, the city a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Who could have written this? And what game do they expect you to play? Holmes folded the note carefully and slipped it into an inner pocket of his coat. "Someone who desires the end of Sherlock Holmes," he said quietly, "in both fiction and fact." An end? Not merely to tarnish my reputation, but to erase me entirely. Volum's manuscript may have been the first act, the murder of the playwright the second. But now the killer demands the final scene. My disappearance or my death? I felt the weight of those words settle upon me like a stone. Do you think someone here in London, in our midst, truly wants that? Holmes gave a slow nod. And that, Watson, is why this is more than a murder investigation. It is a battle for legend itself. He rose, brisk and purposeful. "We must return to the theater. We need to speak with Evelyn Templar again, and with Mr. Flint. There are threads here we have not yet pulled." I gathered my coat and hat, steeling myself for what lay ahead. As we stepped into the fog-choked night once more, Holmes glanced at me with that inscrutable expression of his. "Prepare yourself, Watson. The lines between reality and fiction are blurring, and we are both about to step on stage." Chapter 3. Shadows on the Stage. The morning after our midnight encounter, London remained shrouded in a thick, damp fog that seemed to seep into the very bones of the city. Baker Street was no refuge from the gloom. The gas lamps flickered dimly through the murk, casting long, uncertain shadows on the uneven pavement. I felt an oppressive chill, not entirely due to the weather. Holmes, however, appeared invigorated. "You see, Watson," he began as I poured our morning tea, This challenge is not simply a vendetta against me personally, but an assault on the very notion of detection, logic, and order. Vollum's play wasn't just fiction. It was a manifesto, a call to dismantle the myth of Sherlock Holmes. I shook my head in disbelief. But why choose you? Why risk inciting such turmoil? Because I embody the idea, the detective who always wins, the mind that solves the unsolvable. To erase me from the public consciousness would be to erase the ideal itself. He leaned forward, eyes blazing, and someone here believes that ideal is dangerous. Just then, a sharp knock at the door interrupted us. It was Lestrade, looking more harried than usual. "Holmes, I need your expertise," he said breathlessly. "There's been another death." We followed Lestrade to Scotland Yard, where the scene had been secured. The body lay sprawled on the floor of a dimly lit study, a letter opener buried deep in his chest. The victim was none other than Horatio Flint, the theatrical agent who had first provided us with insight into Vollum's final days. Holmes knelt beside the corpse, examining the wound with a keen eye. "Single, precise, no hesitation," he murmured. "This was no crime of passion, but of purpose." Lestrade handed him a note found in Flint's pocket. Holmes unfolded it carefully. "The truth is a mirror shattered by many hands. Beware the final act." Holmes's expression darkened. "The killer is sending us a message, Watson," I nodded grimly, "and it appears the curtain has only just risen on this deadly performance." Holmes folded the note carefully, his face grave. "The truth is a mirror shattered by many hands." He spoke the phrase slowly, as though tasting the words. "A warning, Watson, but also a clue. Someone is deliberately splintering this investigation." Lestrade crossed his arms, his expression a mixture of frustration and urgency. "That's all very poetic, Holmes, but it doesn't get us closer to a suspect." Holmes's gaze turned to me. "No, it does not. But poetry, like all art, often reveals hidden truths. Flint was more than a simple agent. He was a gatekeeper, someone who stood between the playwright's vision and the public. And now he is dead," I said. "Just like Vollum." Lestrade nodded grimly. "Two deaths, both connected to the theater and to you, Holmes. The public is beginning to murmur." Holmes stood abruptly and strode to the window. Outside, the city churned in the rain and fog, muffling the sounds of distant traffic and street cries. "We must delve deeper into this world of performance and illusion," he said. "The theater is not merely a backdrop. It is the very stage upon which this drama unfolds." I studied his face, noting the familiar intensity, his mind already racing far beyond the confines of our present moment. "Where do we begin?" I asked. "The play's manuscript," Holmes replied, "and those who possessed it or had reason to fear it." Lestrade interjected. "Evelyn Templar has been questioned, but she's uncooperative, claims to have no knowledge of Flint's death or the circumstances surrounding Vollum's demise." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Her performance is flawless, but it is precisely that which makes her suspect." "Have you any proof?" Lestrade demanded. Holmes turned with a sudden smile, enigmatic as ever. "Proof is a luxury, Lestrade. Suspicion is the engine of detection." The days that followed were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, shadowed inquiries, and restless nights spent poring over the fragmented manuscript. Holmes had me escort him to theaters, rehearsal halls, and smoky clubs where actors, playwrights, and stagehands mingled in a web of secrecy and ambition. At the Lyceum, Evelyn Templar watched us with hawk-like eyes, always guarded, always poised. Yet there were moments when her composure cracked, quick, almost imperceptible slips that Holmes noted with clinical precision. One evening, as we waited for her to finish a rehearsal, Holmes turned to me. "Notice the way she avoids direct answers, Watson? The truth is a play within a play, and Evelyn is both actor and director. Do you believe she had a hand in Vollum's death? I believe she knew more than she admits, and that knowledge might have been deadly." Our investigation soon uncovered a tangled skein of relationships, jealousies, betrayals, and secrets among the theatrical community. Holmes became especially intrigued by a certain Mr. Percival Crane, a rival playwright whose works had long competed with Vollum's. Crane's disdain for Vollum was well known, but so was his flair for the dramatic. We arranged to meet Crane at a private club in Soho, a dimly lit den of artifice and smoke, where the city's literary elite gathered. Crane was a man of striking presence, tall, angular, with sharp eyes that gleamed beneath a mop of unruly dark hair. He greeted us with a sardonic smile. "So, Holmes and Watson," he said smoothly, "to what do I owe the pleasure? Are you here to solve the mystery of my genius, or to cast aspersions on my integrity?" Holmes did not flinch. "Mr. Crane, your rivalry with Mr. Vollum is no secret. Did you ever fear his final play might eclipse your own work?" Crane laughed, a short, mirthless sound. "Fear? No, but I admit it piqued my curiosity. Vollum was always trying to outwit the world, outmaneuver the narrative. But to kill Sherlock Holmes? That's a stunt even I wouldn't attempt." Holmes leaned forward, voice low and intent. "Yet someone has done just that. The question is, who?" Crane's gaze flickered. "You might look closer to home, Detective. The theater is full of shadows, and not all are cast by the stage lights." Leaving the club, Holmes was silent for a long while. "Crane is a man who thrives on chaos," he observed finally. "But this murder is too precise, too calculated for a simple act of professional jealousy." "Then what are we dealing with?" I asked. Holmes paused beneath a flickering gas lamp, his breath forming a ghostly mist. "An author, a murderer, and a myth, all intertwined. The killer is rewriting the story, Watson, and we must find the pen before the final chapter is written." The next morning found us at the British Museum, an unexpected refuge for the kind of research Holmes required. The reading room's quiet was punctuated only by the scratching of quills and the rustle of turning pages. Holmes was intent upon a series of newspaper clippings collected from recent months, reports of murders, disappearances, and strange occurrences connected to London's theatrical world. "There is a pattern here, Watson," he said, tapping a brittle clipping with his finger. 3 deaths, 2 linked to Vollum, 1 to Flint, and now whispers of a 4th in the East End. I glanced over his shoulder at the article titled "Mysterious Death of a Stagehand in Whitechapel." The details were scarce but chilling, found strangled in a locked dressing room with no signs of forced entry. Holmes looked up. "The killer is cleaning house, Watson, removing loose ends before the final act." I shuddered at the thought. "But why target the theater? And why frame you?" Holmes stood, pacing slowly as if rehearsing a long-forgotten script. "Because I am the symbol of reason in this city, the ultimate detective. To discredit me is to destabilize the very concept of justice. To make my death both fiction and reality is to shatter the public's faith in truth." I watched as he paused at a display case, his fingers lightly brushing the glass. "This is no ordinary adversary. They are artists themselves, master manipulators who wield murder as their brush." Later that day, Holmes and I arranged a meeting with Evelyn Templar at her lodgings on Camden Street. The room was modest, lit by a single oil lamp whose flames danced nervously against the peeling wallpaper. She greeted us with a faint smile, but there was tension beneath the surface, a fragile veneer barely concealing fear. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said formally. "I trust you have come to discuss Mr. Vollum." Holmes inclined his head. "Indeed, you were close to him. Tell me, Evelyn, did you ever suspect he was in danger?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He was obsessed with his manuscript in the weeks before his death, but he never said why. Did he mention a threat? A person who might want to silence him?" Templar's eyes darkened. "Only in vague terms. A shadow that haunted him. Something beyond the stage." Holmes pressed gently. "Did he ever name this shadow?" "No," she whispered. "But sometimes he spoke of a presence in the theater. Someone who watches from the wings." I noted the tremor in her voice, the way her fingers clenched the fabric of her skirt. "Do you fear this presence, Evelyn?" Holmes asked. "Yes," she admitted, "and I fear I may already be caught in its web." As we left her lodgings, Holmes was pensive. "Templar is hiding something," he mused, "perhaps out of loyalty or fear." I asked, "Do you think she is complicit?" "Not yet, but she is a key to unlocking this mystery." We made our way back toward Baker Street, the fog now heavier, swallowing the gas lamps whole. "Watson," Holmes said quietly, "the killer is conducting a performance on the grandest scale, a drama in which we are unwilling actors." "And the final scene?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "That is what we must discover before the curtain falls." Chapter 4: The Masks We Wear. The fog had lifted slightly by morning, leaving London damp and gray as if the city itself were holding its breath. Baker Street was quieter than usual, the street vendors still setting up their carts, the early trams clattering down the cobblestones. Holmes sat by the window, eyes distant, his hands steepled beneath his chin. "Watson," he said without turning, "our adversary is no ordinary criminal. He or she understands the power of narrative better than most authors I have encountered. This is a contest of stories, and we must be careful not to become mere characters in another's design." I nodded. "A dangerous game indeed." Holmes rose abruptly and fetched a small leather-bound book from his cluttered desk. It was Volum's original manuscript. "I have spent hours studying this text, and it is a masterpiece of subtlety and menace." He flipped to a passage marked with red ink. "The detective falls, not by brute force, but by the poison of doubt. When truth becomes a lie and ally turns to foe, the greatest mind may falter." Holmes tapped the page thoughtfully. "The method of my death in Volum's play is both symbolic and precise. The killer has mimicked that very method in Volum's own demise." I recalled the manner of Volum's death, a staged accident that looked all too accidental. "Then the killer wants us to follow the script," I said. "To walk the path laid out in ink." "Precisely. But every good playwright knows that the best plot twists lie hidden in the margins." Our next destination was the theater once more. The Grand Lyceum, a cavernous hall of red velvet curtains, gilded balconies, and endless echoes. Holmes had arranged a meeting with the theater manager, Mr. Reginald Hawthorne, a man of impeccable manners but nervous eyes. Hawthorne led us through the labyrinthine corridors backstage, past the clutter of props and half-painted scenery, to a private office lined with playbills and photographs. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Hawthorne greeted us. "I fear these events have cast a pall over our establishment." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Hawthorne, we require access to the theater's ledgers and correspondence related to Mr. Volum and Mr. Flint." Hawthorne hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. You will find them in my private safe." He opened a heavy mahogany cabinet and retrieved a bundle of letters and accounts. Holmes began to sift through them carefully. Among the mundane business letters were messages hinting at threats, an unsigned note demanding Volum cease his work, and another warning Flint to stay away from certain documents. "These correspondences confirm our suspicions," Holmes said grimly. "The killer is orchestrating this with deliberate cruelty." I looked over a letter bearing an unfamiliar seal, a black raven on a silver field. "Do you recognize this emblem?" I asked. Hawthorne frowned. "No, it is not affiliated with any company or guild here." Holmes studied the seal thoughtfully. "A signature from the shadows, perhaps." Later, as we walked beneath the gaslights toward Baker Street, Holmes paused suddenly. "Watson, the greatest deception lies not in what is seen, but what is deliberately hidden." He produced a small folded card from his waistcoat pocket. It bore a single line of verse, written in the same crimson ink as the threatening letters. "When the final mask falls, the true face is revealed." Holmes's eyes were steely. "We are dealing with a killer who wears many faces. To unmask them, we must first understand the masks themselves." I looked at him and saw not just the detective I knew, but a man burdened with the weight of legend and the deadly stakes that accompanied it. "The game is far from over, Holmes." "No, Watson," he replied quietly. "It has only just begun." The letter with the raven seal burned in my pocket as Holmes and I made our way back through the misty streets. The gas lamps seemed dimmer now, their light swallowed by the thickening fog. Holmes broke the silence at last. "The raven is a potent symbol. Death, prophecy, a harbinger of doom. Its presence here is deliberate, meant to instill fear." I nodded slowly. "But who would choose such a symbol? Someone with literary pretensions? A man who wishes to cloak himself in menace?" Holmes gave a short laugh, sharp and dry. "A theatrical villain, perhaps. Or someone who wishes us to believe so." At Baker Street, Holmes spread out the letters and papers on the desk, his sharp eyes scanning for inconsistencies. "Look here, Watson," he said, pointing to a ledger from the theater. "See the payments made to Evelyn Templar? They are irregular, often arriving days before Volum's meetings." I frowned. "A secret relationship?" "Possibly. Or a financial arrangement meant to silence or influence her." Holmes paused, then reached for the manuscript once more. "Volum's words echo in my mind. The detective falls by poison, by doubt. If Evelyn is caught between loyalty and fear, she may be the key to unraveling this." Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered, holding a small envelope. "It arrived just now, sirs. No name, no seal, only this." She handed it to Holmes. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single card, the same black raven embossed in the corner, and beneath it a message typed on a small old-fashioned typewriter. "You see only shadows on the stage. The truth waits in the wings." Holmes's eyes narrowed. A direct challenge. I felt a cold wave of unease wash over me. "This is no mere game, Holmes. The killer is toying with us." Holmes folded the card slowly. "Indeed. And it is a game we must win." The following evening, Holmes insisted on returning to the theater for a closer inspection. We arrived just as the final rehearsal of a new play was ending. The auditorium was nearly empty, save for a few stagehands dismantling the set. Holmes led me through the backstage corridors, down winding staircases, and into the labyrinthine maze of dressing rooms. Stopping before a heavy oak door, he knocked sharply. "Evelyn?" he called softly. The door opened to reveal her, pale, weary, but composed. "You shouldn't be here," she said, eyes darting nervously. Holmes's voice was gentle but firm. "We need the truth, Evelyn. Lives depend upon it." She stepped aside, allowing us in. The room was sparsely furnished, a mirror with bright bulbs around the frame, and scripts scattered across a small table. Evelyn sat, clasping her hands tightly. "There's more to this than you know," she began. "Volum's manuscript was not just a story. It was a confession." I leaned forward. "A confession?" "Yes," she whispered. "He wrote about a secret, something that could destroy powerful people in this city." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "Do you know what this secret is?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I do, but telling you could cost me my life." Holmes's eyes were unwavering. "Then you must trust us, Evelyn." She swallowed hard, then began to speak in a low voice, revealing a tangled web of blackmail, hidden identities, and a conspiracy reaching far beyond the theater's footlights. Evelyn's hands trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Volum's manuscript was more than fiction. It was an exposé cloaked in metaphor, designed to unmask a shadowy cabal that manipulates London's theater and, by extension, its politics. Holmes leaned in, his piercing gaze steady. "A cabal? What sort of organization?" She glanced nervously toward the door, as if fearing unseen ears. "They call themselves the Black Raven Society." My pulse quickened. The raven symbol now made chilling sense. Evelyn continued. "They are puppeteers, Watson. Wealthy men and women with influence in government, business, and the arts. Volum discovered their control over the city's theaters, using them to sway public opinion and suppress dissent." "Then Volum's play was a threat," I said. "A revelation they could not allow." "Yes," Evelyn said, eyes haunted. "That's why he died. And why Flint was silenced. He was an informant." Holmes's expression darkened. "And now they target anyone who might uncover the truth." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Do you know who leads them?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "A man named Lucian Crowthorne." Holmes's voice dropped low. "A name I've heard in whispers, associated with many unexplained disappearances and scandals. If he is behind this, we are dealing with a most dangerous adversary." She swallowed. "Crowthorne is a master of disguise and deception. No one knows what he truly looks like. He controls the society from the shadows." Holmes's eyes gleamed with resolve. "Then we must shine a light into those shadows." The weight of Evelyn's confession hung heavily in the room. I looked at Holmes and saw a rare moment of vulnerability beneath his usual steely confidence. "Watson," Holmes said quietly, "this is no ordinary case. We are confronting a cabal whose reach extends far beyond what we imagined." Evelyn rose, her resolve hardening. "I want to help. Volum's death cannot be in vain." Holmes nodded. "Together, we shall unmask the Black Raven Society and expose their crimes." As we left Evelyn's lodgings, the fog had thickened once again, cloaking the city in uncertainty. Holmes turned to me. "The masks we wear, Watson, are often more telling than the faces beneath. It is time we removed some masks of our own." Chapter 5. The Black Raven's Flight. The days following Evelyn's revelation were fraught with tension. The fog that clung to London seemed thicker than ever, as though the city itself conspired to keep the cabal's secrets veiled. Holmes and I worked tirelessly, poring over documents, tracking correspondences, and quietly questioning contacts in the theatrical and political spheres. Holmes had taken to visiting a shadowy establishment in the East End known as the Raven's Wing, a tavern whispered about in hushed tones, said to be a gathering place for those involved in the Black Raven Society. He did not invite me on these excursions, preferring discretion. I trusted his judgment, though I was anxious for news. One evening, as the gas lamps sputtered in the gathering dusk, a hurried knock came at our door. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a young courier, his face pale and eyes wide with urgency. He handed Holmes a sealed envelope, marked with the black raven. Holmes broke the seal carefully and withdrew a folded note. Reading it, his expression darkened. "Watson," he said gravely, "we have been summoned to a place called the Hollow Theater on the outskirts of Whitechapel. An invitation, or a challenge." I felt the familiar thrill mixed with dread that always accompanied such summons. This was no longer a mere investigation. It was a dangerous dance with forces that would not hesitate to kill. Holmes packed his coat and cane with swift precision. "Prepare yourself, Watson. Tonight, we step into the raven's nest." The evening had fallen deep and heavy by the time Holmes and I left Baker Street, the gaslights casting long, wavering shadows through the damp London streets. A biting chill clung to the air, sharp enough to prick the skin beneath our overcoats. Outside, the city's usual cacophony, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, the muffled calls of street vendors, the faint echo of a distant church bell, seemed to recede into a muted backdrop, as if the night itself wished to hold its breath. The sealed envelope with the black raven was a stark reminder of the peril we faced. The message it contained was brief and cryptic, an unmistakable summons that bore all the hallmarks of the cabal's dark theatricality. "The stage is set. Your presence is requested at the Hollow Theater, Whitechapel. Midnight. Come prepared." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a mixture of anticipation and caution. "They wish to draw us out, Watson, to confront us in their own domain." His voice was steady, but I detected the undercurrent of tension beneath his calm exterior. I nodded, steeling myself. We must be ready for anything. The journey to Whitechapel was a plunge into a less polished, more shadow-ridden London. Narrow streets lined with dilapidated buildings pressed in on us, the flickering lamps offering scant protection against the enveloping darkness. The air smelled faintly of smoke, damp stone, and the ever-present tang of the Thames. Holmes navigated the twisting alleys with uncanny certainty, finally stopping before a heavy, wrought-iron gate set into a crumbling brick wall. Beyond it lay the decrepit facade of the Hollow Theater, its boarded-up windows and faded marquee suggesting a once grand house now surrendered to neglect and time. A single lamplight swung slowly in the night breeze, casting a ghostly glow on peeling posters that advertised long-forgotten plays. The words, "The Mask of Shadows," stared down at us, as if daring us to cross the threshold. Holmes drew a slender key from his pocket and unlocked the gate. The hinges groaned a mournful protest as we stepped inside. The courtyard was cluttered with discarded stage props and shattered glass, the echoes of a forgotten era. Our footsteps disturbed a sudden flock of ravens, their black wings flapping with harsh cries that seemed to echo the symbol of the cabal. Holmes paused, listening. "They mark their territory with these birds, Watson. A warning and a signature." We advanced to the theater's entrance, a grand wooden door scarred by time and neglect. Holmes pressed his ear against it, then gave a subtle nod. "Someone is inside." Pushing the door open, we stepped into the cavernous foyer. Dust motes floated in the feeble glow of a few scattered candles, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and old velvet. The silence was almost tangible, broken only by the distant creak of a wooden floorboard. Suddenly, a voice rang out, a smooth, measured tone that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. "Welcome, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. Your reputation precedes you." From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in black, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that cast his features into shadow. His movements were deliberate, almost theatrical. Holmes stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "Lucian Crowthorne." The man inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "In the flesh, as you see. Or perhaps the ghost, since I hear I have become something of a specter in your investigations." I studied him carefully. Despite the obscurity, his presence exuded a cold authority, a predator's poise honed through years of evading the law and the light. Crowthorne gestured toward a narrow corridor. "Come, let us speak where the shadows are less oppressive." We followed him through winding halls adorned with faded murals and grotesque masks, the theater's once glorious past suffusing the walls with an eerie atmosphere. In a small, dimly lit parlor, Crowthorne finally removed his hat, revealing a sharp face with steely eyes and a thin, cruel smile. His hair was prematurely silver, swept back like a villain from one of Volum's plays. "Mr. Holmes," he began, "I confess a certain admiration for your skill. You see patterns where others see chaos. You pursue truth as a hound pursues scent. But sometimes the truth is too dangerous." Holmes responded evenly. "Dangerous truths do not justify murder." Crowthorne's smile widened. "But murder is an art, is it not? A performance, meticulously planned and executed. Volum's death was the opening act. Flint's the second. You, Mr. Holmes, are the final scene, or the unexpected twist." I bristled at his insinuation. "You framed Holmes for these crimes." "Ah, but only in fiction, dear doctor. Or do you doubt the power of narrative? The public loves a good story, especially one in which the hero falls." Holmes's eyes locked onto Crowthorne's. "What is your endgame? What do you hope to achieve by this macabre theater?" Crowthorne leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "To unseat the complacent order, to reshape London's destiny from the shadows where true power lies. And to do so," Holmes added, "you destroy innocent lives and threaten justice itself." "Collateral damage," Crowthorne replied with chilling detachment. "A necessary sacrifice." Holmes's hand twitched toward his cane, but Crowthorne raised a gloved hand in warning. "Patience, detective. I have no wish to end this evening in violence. Instead, consider this an invitation, a challenge." He pulled from his coat a small, intricately carved box, sliding it across the table. "Inside is the key to the next stage of our game. Solve its mystery, and you may yet save those who still walk in the shadows." Holmes opened the box carefully. Inside lay a puzzle, a miniature mechanical device of exquisite craftsmanship, a labyrinthine maze that clicked and shifted beneath his fingers. "A game within a game," Holmes murmured, eyes alight with fascination. "You do enjoy theatrics, Crowthorne." Crowthorne's gaze was cold. "So do you, Holmes. But remember, in every good drama, the audience never knows who will live or die before the final act." With that, he swept the hat back over his head and vanished into the shadows as swiftly as he had appeared. Holmes closed the box and looked at me. "We must decipher this device, Watson. It is the key to uncovering their next move, and perhaps to saving lives." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon us. Outside, the ravens cawed, their calls rising in a dark chorus. "The black raven flies tonight," Holmes said grimly, "and we must learn to fly with it, or be torn apart beneath its wings." Back at Baker Street, the clock ticked steadily as Holmes examined the puzzle box by lamplight. The intricate gears and hidden compartments challenged even his prodigious mind. Hours passed with little progress until suddenly, with a soft click, a panel slid open to reveal a folded piece of parchment. Holmes unfolded it slowly, revealing a map marked with cryptic symbols and annotations. "Watson," he said, "this is no ordinary map. It charts a route through London's underground, the catacombs, old tunnels, and forgotten passageways beneath the city." I traced the map with my finger. "A secret route, perhaps the Cabal's means of moving unseen." "Precisely. And at the center lies the Raven's Nest, the heart of their operations." Holmes looked up, his expression resolute. "We must follow this path, but with utmost caution. We are entering the lion's den." The next night, armed with lanterns, maps, and our wits, Holmes and I ventured into the damp, musty tunnels beneath London. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water and the echo of our footsteps. At times, the passage narrowed to mere crawl space. At others, it opened into cavernous chambers adorned with faded murals and ancient symbols. As we pressed deeper, I could feel the oppressive weight of centuries pressing down upon us, a palpable sense of history and hidden power. Suddenly, a faint light flickered ahead. We approached cautiously, finding a small group gathered around a table strewn with documents and strange devices, men and women cloaked in dark robes, faces obscured by raven-shaped masks. Holmes and I exchanged a glance, knowing we had found the heart of the Black Raven Society. The confrontation was inevitable. Chapter 6. Into the Raven's Nest. The flickering candlelight cast long, sinister shadows on the damp stone walls of the underground chamber. The heavy scent of wax and smoke mingled with the musty earthiness of the catacombs as Holmes and I silently observed the robed figures gathered around the rough-hewn table. Their faces were hidden behind black masks shaped like raven beaks, their whispered voices low and urgent, weaving an eerie melody in the hollow cavern. Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Watson, this is no ordinary gathering. It is the very core of the Black Raven Society. We must tread carefully." I nodded, heart pounding. Despite my training and countless brushes with danger alongside Holmes, this moment felt charged with a gravitas that chilled me to the bone. From our concealed vantage point behind a crumbling pillar, I caught sight of documents spread across the table. Maps of London, lists of names, detailed plans. Some of the papers bore the same raven seal we had seen before, stamped in deep crimson. One of the figures, a tall man whose voice carried a smooth, commanding authority, addressed the group. "The time grows near. Our influence over the city must expand. Volum's foolish exposé was a setback, but it will not halt our design. The Detective Holmes must be neutralized, once and for all." Holmes's jaw tightened. Neutralized, yes, but not without a reckoning. A sudden noise, a scuffing step, alerted the assembly. Their heads turned sharply in our direction. My breath caught as one figure gestured, and in an instant, the room erupted with movement. Holmes and I sprang from our hiding place, drawing our weapons. The chamber echoed with shouts and the clang of metal as robed figures lunged toward us. I grappled with one assailant, his cloak snagging on the rough stone, while Holmes moved with balletic precision, disarming and disabling two others. The fight was swift and brutal, the darkness around us fractured by the glow of lanterns swinging wildly. Finally, the last of the attackers fled into the tunnels, leaving us panting and bloodied but victorious. Holmes surveyed the scattered papers. "We have what we came for, but this is only the beginning." Among the documents, he found a letter addressed to someone named E. Its contents hinting at betrayal within the cabal itself. The words were chilling. "Evelyn must be silenced. Her loyalty wanes. She knows too much." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Evelyn's courage might soon be her undoing. Holmes carefully folded the letter. "We must warn her. The Black Raven's web tightens around those who dare defy it." As we retraced our steps through the labyrinthine tunnels, the weight of unseen eyes pressed upon us. The game had changed. The stakes were no longer merely to solve a murder or clear Holmes's name. They were now about survival, about exposing a secret power determined to remain in darkness. Outside, the first pale light of dawn crept over London's rooftops, bathing the city in a fragile hope. But within the shadows beneath, the Black Raven still spread its wings. We emerged from the damp labyrinth of tunnels, the cold morning air a sharp contrast to the stale, fetid breath of the catacombs. The sun had just begun its slow ascent, casting a faint amber glow over the soot-darkened rooftops of Whitechapel. For a brief moment, the city seemed innocent again, its endless streets promising safety. But I knew better. The menace we faced was woven into its very fabric, invisible yet ever present. Holmes moved swiftly, his expression taut with urgency. "We must get to Evelyn. She is in grave danger." I nodded, keeping pace as we hurried through the narrow streets back toward the theater district. The map from the puzzle box was folded carefully in Holmes's coat pocket, a vital clue guiding us toward the heart of the conspiracy. Upon reaching Evelyn's lodging, we found her door ajar, an ominous sign. Inside, the room was in disarray, papers scattered as if searched in haste. Evelyn herself was nowhere to be found. A sudden chill passed over me. Holmes bent to examine the scene with methodical scrutiny. Footprints on the carpet, a faint trace of perfume lingering in the air, and a crumpled note pinned beneath a chair. Holmes unfolded the note, reading aloud in a clipped voice. "You cannot hide from the shadows that know your secrets." I caught the terror in his eyes. "She's been taken." Holmes's jaw clenched. "By the Black Raven Society, no doubt. They want to ensure their secrets remain buried." Without hesitation, Holmes and I set out once more, following faint leads to a disused warehouse near the Thames. The fog lay thick over the riverbank, the distant clang of industry mingling with the cries of night birds. We slipped inside the building, a cavernous space cluttered with crates and machinery. Shadows flickered as lanterns swung in the breeze from broken windows. From a dark corner came a soft, muffled cry. "Evelyn!" I called, rushing forward. She emerged from behind a stack of crates, her face pale but resolute. "Thank God," she whispered. "They intended to keep me here until the manuscript and the truth were lost forever." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze sharp and reassuring. "You are safe now, but we must move quickly." Evelyn nodded, gathering her scattered papers. "The Black Raven's plans go far beyond London. They have agents embedded in Parliament, in the press, even in Scotland Yard itself." My blood ran cold. Corruption at every level. "Indeed," she said grimly. "And they intend to silence anyone who threatens their control. That includes you, Mr. Holmes." Holmes exchanged a knowing glance with me. "Then we have no time to waste. We must expose them before their shadows consume us all." As dawn broke over the city once again, a new determination took hold in us, a resolve to bring the Black Raven Society's darkness into the light, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. Masks and Revelations. The following morning, the streets of London bustled with the usual clamor, oblivious to the peril creeping beneath their feet. The city was a beast alive with 1,000 stories, and amid them all, ours felt like a whispered secret, dangerous and urgent. Back at Baker Street, the room was thick with smoke from Holmes's pipe, the air heavy with the scent of burning tobacco and quiet urgency. Holmes sat at his cluttered desk, poring over the documents Evelyn had brought from her captivity. Maps, letters, coded telegrams, each piece a shard of a vast, hidden puzzle. Evelyn, seated by the window, looked worn but determined. "Their reach is greater than I feared," she said quietly. "The manuscript was merely a spark. They want to extinguish any flame that threatens their control." Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "The Black Raven Society is not merely a shadowy cabal. They are an institution unto themselves, threading through government, business, even law enforcement." I listened, struck by the sheer scale of the conspiracy. Then how do we fight something so vast? Holmes's eyes gleamed with resolve. By exploiting their hubris. No secret society is flawless. They leave cracks in their own armor. Evelyn looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "There is one weakness we have discovered, a faction within the society itself that resents Crowthorne's ruthless leadership." "Internal dissent?" Holmes mused. "An invaluable wedge." We spent the day strategizing. Holmes reached out discreetly to trusted allies, inspectors, journalists, even some of the actors from London's theater world, assembling a covert network to gather intelligence and spread carefully curated leaks. As dusk settled, Holmes and I prepared to visit a contact who might hold a critical piece of the puzzle, a former member of the Black Raven Society, a man named Jasper Thorne. His betrayal had cost him dearly, but his knowledge could tip the scales. The meeting was set at an unassuming pub in Soho, a place thick with cigarette smoke and the murmur of clandestine deals. Inside, Jasper awaited, a gaunt figure with sharp eyes and a haunted expression. He slid a folded envelope across the table. "Crowthorne plans a grand event," Jasper whispered, voice trembling. "A gathering of the society's elite, masked and secret, at the Royal Lyceum Theatre. The next phase of their plan will be unveiled there." Holmes's fingers tightened around the envelope. "An opportunity to expose them all at once." Jasper nodded. "But beware, Crowthorne's reach is vast. He will be expecting opposition." As we left the pub, the weight of the impending confrontation settled heavily upon us. The stage was set for a dangerous gambit, one that could either bring the Black Raven's empire crashing down or bury us all in darkness. Holmes's voice was steady but grave. "Watson, the game's final act approaches. We must be prepared for whatever shadows the night conceals." The days leading to the Royal Lyceum event unfolded like a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. London, in its relentless bustle, paid no heed to the intricate dance of shadows beneath its polished surface. Yet beneath the veneer of everyday life, the air thrummed with danger and whispered secrets. Back in Baker Street, our flat became a war room. Evelyn worked tirelessly alongside Holmes and me, cross-referencing documents and transcribing coded messages. The manuscript, the one Vollum had penned that foretold Holmes's own death, lay open on the table, a grim reminder of how fiction and reality had become dangerously entangled. Holmes's mind was a relentless engine, analyzing every detail, every subtle hint. "The Society's elite gathering at the Royal Lyceum is their reckoning," he said one evening, voice low and intense. "We must infiltrate it with utmost caution. There will be no second chances." Evelyn nodded, her jaw set with fierce determination. "I have contacts within the theatrical world, actors, stagehands, costume designers, who can help us gain entry unnoticed." Holmes smiled faintly. Excellent. The theater is their stage and their sanctuary. If we can turn their own domain against them, we might illuminate their dark designs. I found myself drawn into preparations I had never before imagined: disguises, secret signals, and the careful crafting of backstories. For the first time, I felt the weight of the game's stakes in my own skin. No longer merely an observer or chronicler, I was an active player in this deadly drama. On the night of the event, the Royal Lyceum Theatre stood resplendent, its facade glittering beneath the gas lamps. A crowd of London's most influential and enigmatic figures milled outside, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks of black and silver, raven motifs prominent among them. Holmes, Evelyn, and I slipped into the throng, our own disguises carefully tailored to blend seamlessly. The orchestra's opening notes drifted through the air, a haunting melody that seemed to echo the tension thrumming in my veins. Inside, the theater's opulence was breathtaking. Velvet drapes, gilded balconies, and crystal chandeliers combined with an undercurrent of menace, the knowledge that beneath the glittering surface lurked conspirators whose machinations threatened the very fabric of our city. Holmes's eyes scanned the room with practiced precision. "There?" he whispered, nodding toward a cluster of figures speaking in hushed tones, their raven masks distinct. We moved cautiously, weaving through the crowd, listening for fragments of conversation, searching for clues. Suddenly, a voice called out, sharp and commanding, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Black Raven's Midnight Masque." A figure stepped onto the stage, a tall man cloaked in black with a silver raven mask that gleamed ominously in the candlelight. Holmes's lips tightened. Crowthorne. The audience hushed as Crowthorne began to speak, his voice resonant and chilling. He unveiled plans to tighten the society's grip on London, to root out dissenters, and to silence those who dared oppose them, including, unmistakably, Holmes. As the crowd listened, I saw glimmers of doubt flicker in some eyes, but fear kept many silent. Holmes caught Evelyn's hand subtly. "Now, Watson, it is time." With practiced calm, Holmes stepped forward, removing his own mask. The room gasped, tension snapping like a live wire. "I stand accused by a fiction made real," Holmes declared, voice clear and unwavering. "But tonight, the truth will rise from the shadows." What followed was a whirlwind: whispers, gasps, accusations hurled. But Holmes's evidence, backed by Evelyn's testimony and Jasper Thorne's documents, began to unravel the cabal's carefully woven lies. The gathering fractured as some members fled in panic. Others faced arrest as our allies moved in. Yet, amid the chaos, Crowthorne slipped away into the night, a final, sinister smile hinting that the battle was far from over. As the theater emptied, I felt a surge of relief mixed with foreboding. The Black Raven Society had been dealt a blow, but its wings still spread wide. Holmes's gaze met mine, steely and resolute. "This is but one act, Watson. The curtain has risen on a far greater drama." Chapter 8. Shadows. Behind the curtain. The dawn after the mask was cold and unforgiving. London awoke unaware of the night's upheavals, its streets humming with routine commerce and gossip, far removed from the revelations that had shaken the underbelly of its power. Yet for those of us entangled in the Black Raven's web, the city felt more a battleground than ever. Holmes, Evelyn, and I convened once more at Baker Street. The room bore the marks of a war room in its own right. Papers strewn across every surface, maps marked with red ink, and an ever-present haze of pipe smoke that blurred the edges of reality. "Crowthorne escaped," Holmes stated flatly, his eyes narrowing as he toyed with his violin bow. "A disappointment, but expected. He is cunning, and his survival is crucial to his continued threat." Evelyn poured herself a cup of tea, hands trembling slightly. "The society will not relent. We have made enemies tonight." "Nor should we expect mercy," Holmes replied. "But the fractures within the society have widened. Some among them doubt Crowthorne's leadership now." I sat back, absorbing the gravity of the situation. What is our next move? Holmes's gaze settled on a particular dossier. We follow the trail deeper into the heart of the city, where the Black Raven's influence touches the highest offices. The true power lies not just in secrecy, but in control. Days passed in a blur of investigation, coded letters intercepted and deciphered, clandestine meetings held under the cover of London fog. Evelyn's courage never wavered, even as danger crept closer. One evening, Holmes received a message, a cryptic summons to a private meeting at the British Museum, a place symbolizing knowledge and history. Yet tonight, the setting for shadows. The three of us made our way there under the cloak of darkness. The grand halls, usually echoing with scholars and tourists, were empty, save for a single figure waiting in the Egyptian exhibit. A man cloaked in dark robes, his face concealed by a mask resembling the very ravens that haunted our ordeal. "You seek the truth." The man's voice was low, edged with warning. "But some truths come at a price." Holmes stepped forward, unwavering. "I am prepared to pay it." The masked figure extended a small box, ornate and ancient. Within lies a key, an artifact tied to the society's origins and their greatest secret. As Holmes opened it, a folded parchment emerged, an intricate map showing hidden passages beneath London's government buildings, along with a series of symbols linked to the Raven's legacy. The figure spoke once more before vanishing into the shadows. "Use it wisely. The next phase begins at midnight." We left the museum with more questions than answers. The game was evolving, no longer merely a battle of wits, but a descent into a labyrinth of history, power, and ancient rites. As midnight approached, Holmes and I prepared for a journey beneath the city, to uncover what lay hidden in the corridors of power, and to confront the darkness that sought to erase him from existence, both in fiction and in fact. The chill of night had settled over London like a thick shroud by the time we returned to Baker Street. The map from the ancient box lay unfurled across the desk, its cryptic symbols staring back at us like silent sentinels guarding secrets centuries old. The delicate parchment crackled faintly as Holmes traced the inked lines with a slender finger, eyes sharp with purpose. "This map," Holmes murmured, "depicts tunnels and chambers hidden beneath the very heart of the city, the corridors beneath Westminster and Whitehall, places few know still exist." Evelyn leaned over the table, her breath shallow. "If the Black Raven Society's roots extend into these catacombs, it explains much. Their influence, their ability to move unseen." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the night pressing on my shoulders. "And if they control these underground passages, no place is truly safe." Holmes nodded. "Our next step is clear. We must descend into these forgotten depths to uncover what lies concealed, and perhaps find the key to dismantling the society's power." Preparations were swift. Armed with lanterns, sturdy boots, and our wits sharpened by months of peril, we set out for the entrance marked on the map, a forgotten archway in an abandoned cellar behind a rundown tavern near Parliament. The tavern's air was thick with stale ale and the murmurs of late-night patrons, oblivious to the history about to be unearthed beneath their feet. The cellar door groaned open, revealing a narrow stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. Holmes lit his lantern, the flickering glow casting eerie shadows on the damp walls. The air grew colder, tinged with the scent of earth and forgotten time. Every footstep echoed ominously as we ventured deeper, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant drip of water. The tunnels twisted and branched, labyrinthine in design. Holmes consulted the map frequently, his voice low but steady. "This way. Here, the passage narrows. Watch your step." We came upon a heavy iron door, rusted but firmly sealed. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she produced a small, ornate key, the one enclosed in the box. With a soft click, the lock gave way. Beyond the door lay a chamber, walls lined with faded murals depicting ravens soaring over a cityscape strikingly similar to London. At the room's center stood a pedestal holding a dusty tome bound in black leather, its cover embossed with a raven's visage. Holmes approached reverently. "This book may hold the origins of the society and their ultimate secret." As he opened the tome, a sudden sound echoed from deeper within the tunnels. A faint but unmistakable shuffle of footsteps, deliberate and slow. "Someone else is down here," I whispered, hand instinctively reaching for my revolver. Holmes's gaze hardened. "Prepare yourselves. The Black Raven's shadows reach even here." From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in midnight, mask shimmering with an iridescent sheen. The stranger's voice was cold, edged with menace. "You trespass where none are welcome." Holmes stepped forward, unwavering. "We seek only the truth." The figure laughed softly. "Truth is a luxury the Black Raven does not afford its enemies." Tension crackled in the stale air. The chamber seemed to close in around us as the mystery deepened, the line between hunter and hunted blurring in the cold, subterranean gloom. Chapter 9. The Raven's Grasp. The flickering lantern light cast long, trembling shadows across the ancient walls as the cloaked figure stepped closer, their movements deliberate and unyielding. Holmes's eyes narrowed, calculating every detail. The slight tremor in the intruder's hand, the rasp of breath beneath the mask, the subtle shift in weight suggesting readiness for violence. "You speak of truth," Holmes said evenly, "yet your presence here is no invitation to dialogue. Who are you to guard these secrets?" The figure's voice dropped to a low whisper, chilling in the stale air. "I am the Raven's warden, sworn to protect what must remain hidden." Evelyn took a cautious step forward. "The world deserves to know. How long can your shadows hold back the dawn?" A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant drip of water. Then, without warning, the warden lunged, swift and silent, a dagger gleaming in the dim light. Holmes reacted instantly, twisting aside the blade with practiced ease. A struggle ensued, a desperate dance of steel and shadow. I drew my revolver, aiming to support Holmes, while Evelyn scrambled to the tome on the pedestal. "Watch the walls!" Holmes barked. "There may be traps." The warden, realizing they were outmatched, vanished abruptly into a hidden passage, leaving behind a faint trace of perfume, jasmine and something darker. Breathing heavily, Holmes turned to the tome. This is no ordinary book. It contains rituals, codes, and names, leaders of the Black Raven Society dating back decades. Evelyn flipped through the brittle pages, her fingers tracing the faded ink. And here, their ultimate plan. Not just control of London, but a network reaching beyond the seas, entwined with governments worldwide. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air. So the manuscript was only the beginning? Holmes's gaze hardened. Indeed. Volum's death, the staged accusations against me, the masquerade, it was all a prelude to a far greater scheme. Suddenly, a faint rumble echoed through the tunnels, dust falling from the ceiling. "We must leave, now," Holmes urged. "These passages are unstable." We fled through the winding corridors, the oppressive weight of the Society's legacy pressing on us. As we emerged into the fog-drenched London streets, the city seemed both familiar and alien, a vast stage where the next act awaited. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like a protective veil. "The Raven's grasp is long, Watson, but so too is our resolve." As we stepped back into the murky fog of London's streets, the chill air was a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness below. Holmes's face was set in grim lines, the flicker of his pipe barely illuminating the shadows beneath his keen eyes. "The Raven's warden," he mused, "a sentinel of secrecy, but clearly one of many. Their reach is far more extensive than we dared imagine." Evelyn shivered, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "What do you make of the perfume? Jasmine? And something else?" Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "An intriguing detail. Such a distinctive scent would be recognized by others in the society. A signature, perhaps, or a calling card." My mind raced. Could it be a clue, a thread to unravel their hidden hierarchy? "Watson," Holmes said quietly, "we must find others who recognize that scent. It may lead us to more of the Society's members, or at least to those who understand their inner workings." Our plans took shape quickly. We split our efforts. Holmes would consult his network in the London theater and underground circles. Evelyn would return to the literary salons and clandestine meetings where whispered conversations sometimes bore fruit. And I would delve into the police archives and informants. Days turned into a tense blur. Every moment brought new threats. A shadowy figure trailing me through fog-draped alleys. Anonymous notes slipped beneath my door, warning me to desist. And the persistent feeling that the eyes of the Black Raven were everywhere. Yet, amid the danger, small victories surfaced. Evelyn uncovered a secret correspondence between Society members referencing the Jasmine sign, which seemed linked to a faction within the group, possibly allies or rivals to Crowthorne. Holmes's theatrical contacts identified a woman known as the Nightingale, reputed to be a messenger and enforcer within the Society, whose signature perfume matched the scent we encountered. One evening, at a dimly lit tavern near Covent Garden, Holmes arranged to meet an informant who claimed to have seen the Nightingale herself at a secret rendezvous. The man, a jittery actor with haunted eyes, whispered, "She's dangerous, sir. Moves like a shadow and strikes like a serpent. If you value your life, don't cross her. Holmes's reply was calm but resolute. We must cross her then, for the truth. That night, as fog thickened over the Thames, I found myself walking a razor's edge between hunter and prey, the line growing ever thinner. We were closing in on the heart of the Black Raven Society, but in doing so, the danger only intensified. The game was no longer just a battle of intellect. It was a fight for survival. Chapter 10. The Nightingale's Song. The city was cloaked in an uneasy stillness as twilight deepened into night. London's fog thickened into a dense veil, swallowing the gas lamps and muffling the usual clamor of carriages and voices. It was the perfect hour for secrets to whisper and shadows to move unseen. Holmes, Evelyn, and I gathered in the dim glow of Baker Street, each of us steeped in the weight of the information we had gathered. The figure known only as the Nightingale had become the fulcrum of our investigation, a ghostly presence both feared and revered within the Black Raven Society. Holmes tapped a slender finger against his lip. If we can intercept her communications, we may unravel the web that ensnares us all. Evelyn nodded, spreading out a series of letters and coded notes she had painstakingly deciphered. She uses a network of couriers, young women disguised as street performers. They pass messages hidden within music sheets and trinkets. I frowned, recalling the bustling markets and theaters where performers thrived, unnoticed amid the city's chaos. So we must find these couriers and follow their trail. Holmes's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Precisely, Watson, and I have just the plan. That evening, under cover of darkness, we positioned ourselves near a popular music hall known for its street musicians and performers. The air was alive with melodies from violins and flutes, mingling with the murmur of the crowd. Among them moved a young woman whose presence seemed to command quiet attention, her eyes sharp, her movements deliberate. Holmes whispered, "That must be one of the couriers." We followed her discreetly as she slipped through narrow alleys and side streets, eventually reaching a hidden doorway beneath a faded sign for the Gilded Lily, a once grand theater now a shadow of its former self. Inside, the scent of dust and old velvet hung heavy. The room was a labyrinth of backstage passages and forgotten props, alive with whispered conversations. Suddenly, a figure emerged, a woman clad in dark silks, her raven mask gleaming faintly under the dim light. The Nightingale. She regarded us coolly, voice like silk laced with steel. "So the great Sherlock Holmes dares to trespass. What song do you hope to hear?" Holmes stepped forward, unflinching. "The truth, Miss Nightingale, the truth about the Black Raven Society and your role within it." A tense silence followed, broken only by the faint rustle of silk and the distant echo of music. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a slow, enigmatic curve of lips. "Very well, but be warned, detective, the night sings many songs, and some are better left unheard." The Nightingale's eyes glittered beneath her mask, sharp as a hawk's, and for a moment the entire backstage area seemed to hold its breath. The faint strains of a violin drifted from somewhere in the shadows, a haunting melody that only heightened the tension. Holmes met her gaze steadily. "You wield great influence within the Black Raven Society. Why have you chosen to reveal yourself to us? What game do you play?" She laughed softly, a sound both melodic and chilling. "Games? Oh, Mr. Holmes, we all play our roles on this grand stage called London. Some seek power, others seek survival. I am no different." Evelyn stepped forward cautiously, her voice steady. "You speak in riddles, but we know the society's grip tightens. The manuscript, Volum's death, it all points to a scheme that endangers more than just Holmes." The Nightingale's smile faded, replaced by a cold resolve. Volum was a fool, imagining that fiction could end us. But stories can be weapons, and sometimes the writer becomes the target. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Then you admit to orchestrating the events that have tried to destroy me, from the manuscript framing me to the attempts on my life?" She shook her head slowly. "I am but one thread in a tapestry woven by darker hands. The true mastermind remains hidden, pulling strings from the shadows." A sudden noise interrupted us, a scuffling behind a curtain. Holmes's hand darted to his pocket, fingers closing around the revolver. From the darkness emerged a young courier, breathless and wide-eyed. "Miss Nightingale, you must leave. Now, they've found the entrance." The Nightingale's eyes flashed with urgency. "So the game quickens. Very well, Mr. Holmes. For now, you have what you came for. But beware, the night's song has many verses yet. Before we could respond, she slipped into the shadows, vanishing like a wraith through a hidden passageway. Holmes turned to the courier. Who has found us? What do they want? The girl swallowed hard. The Black Raven's enforcers. They're closing in to silence anyone who knows too much. Evelyn's face paled. We must warn the others and prepare for what comes next. As we hurried through the maze of backstage corridors, the weight of the society's reach pressed heavily upon us. The night was far from over, and the shadows behind the curtain promised more danger and revelation still. Chapter 11. The Web Tightens. The cold night air bit sharply as we emerged from the shadowed depths of the Gilded Lily, leaving behind the flickering candlelight and whispered secrets of the backstage. The streets of London, slick with recent rain, reflected the hazy glow of gas lamps as fog curled around us like a living thing, obscuring our retreat. Holmes moved with purposeful urgency, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow as though expecting an ambush at any moment. Evelyn kept close, her usual composure fraying beneath the relentless pressure of recent revelations. I followed, revolver gripped tightly, every sense alert to the faintest sound. The courier's warning was no idle threat, Holmes murmured, voice low. The Black Raven's enforcers are mobilizing. They will attempt to cut off our escape routes and isolate us. Evelyn's voice was tight but resolute. We cannot let them. The society's tendrils reach into the very heart of London's institutions. Every step we take risks exposure. I nodded grimly. And every moment brings us closer to the truth, or to a trap. We made our way back to Baker Street, the familiar surroundings providing scant comfort. Holmes immediately set to work, examining the fragments of clues we had gathered. The map from the underground chamber, the coded letters, the testimony of the courier, and the cryptic warnings of the Nightingale, all pieces of a puzzle whose edges seemed to shift with every revelation. Holmes paused before a faded illustration in the tome we had recovered, a symbol of a raven clasping a dagger. This emblem, he said, appears repeatedly in the Society's artifacts. It marks their highest order, those closest to the mastermind. Evelyn traced the symbol with a trembling finger. If we can identify who bears this mark, we might find the puppet master. Holmes's gaze hardened. Indeed, but that will require venturing into the lion's den itself, into the Society's most secret gatherings, where masks are worn both literal and figurative. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. To infiltrate such a dangerous inner circle would test every ounce of our cunning and courage. As dawn crept over London, casting pale light through the windows, we made our plans. The Black Raven Society was tightening its grip, but so too was our resolve. The hunt was no longer just for answers. It was for survival, for justice, and for the man whose very existence was under threat. Outside, the city stirred unaware, a vast stage upon which the final acts of this dark drama were poised to unfold. The dawn's pale light did little to lift the weight pressing upon us. The events of the night lingered like a shadow, settling deep in the corners of Baker Street. Holmes sat at his desk, poring over the tome and the map, his mind clearly working at a furious pace. Evelyn, seated nearby, kept her gaze distant, fingers nervously tracing the rim of her teacup. I found myself restless, my thoughts circling the implications of the Society's growing menace. The emblem, Holmes began again, breaking the silence, is our beacon and our bane. It marks the elite within the Society, the very ones orchestrating this campaign to erase me, both in the public eye and, more disturbingly, in reality itself. I leaned forward. Do we have any indication who among the city's elite bears such a mark? Or is it purely a secret known only within their ranks? Holmes's eyes flashed. That, my dear Watson, is precisely what we must discover. Our first step is to infiltrate the upcoming gathering of the Society's leaders, an event shrouded in secrecy and, according to our sources, held within the walls of the Temple Church. Evelyn's face tightened with concern. To walk into their midst, without protection or disguise, we risk everything. Holmes smiled faintly, the spark of the old game lighting his eyes. Fear is a luxury we cannot afford. We must assume roles, adopt masks of our own, and use their rituals against them. I felt a surge of determination mixed with unease. To enter the very lair of those who sought Holmes's destruction was a perilous venture. Yet the only path forward lay in the heart of darkness. Preparations began at once. Holmes employed the talents of an old friend, a master of disguise and theatrical craft, to fashion costumes befitting the occasion. Evelyn, drawing upon her connections within London's artistic circles, secured invitations under carefully fabricated names. I practiced the careful art of silent observation, knowing that in such company, even a misstep could prove fatal. Days blurred in a frenzy of activity. Each of us steeled ourselves for the dangerous masquerade ahead. Our alliance was more than necessity. It was a bond forged in the crucible of shared peril. On the evening of the gathering, as the gas lamps outside flickered to life and the city hummed with unseen tension, we donned our disguises. Holmes's demeanor was calm, yet his eyes betrayed the keen mind racing beneath the surface. Evelyn's usual grace was tempered with steel, and I, though ever the outsider, resolved to match their courage. The temple church loomed before us, its ancient stones weathered by centuries, but now alive with whispered conspiracies and unseen watchers. As we stepped beneath its arches, the game truly began. The heavy oak doors of Temple Church creaked open before us, revealing an interior bathed in flickering candlelight and shadow. The scent of old stone and melted wax mingled with a faint trace of incense, an odd mixture of sanctity and secrecy. The vaulted ceilings rose above like silent witnesses, their shadows playing tricks on the eye. We stepped inside, our footsteps muffled against the cold flagstones. Around us, figures cloaked in black robes moved with deliberate purpose, their faces obscured by intricately crafted masks, some fashioned like ravens, others bearing sigils of serpents or thorned crowns. The air hummed with hushed voices and the tension of veiled threats. Holmes whispered, "Observe closely. Every mask, every gesture is a message." Evelyn scanned the crowd, her eyes sharp. There. Those bearing the raven emblem on their robes. Leaders, no doubt. I felt the prickling awareness of being watched. The eyes behind those masks were cold, calculating. We were intruders, yet we carried the audacity of desperation. A tall figure emerged at the center, a man whose mask was a masterpiece of black feathers and silver filigree. He spoke with a voice both commanding and icy. "Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the circle where the city's fate is decided." The assembly responded with murmured assent. Holmes stepped forward, matching the speaker's measured tone. "I come seeking answers and justice." A ripple passed through the crowd. The masked leader's gaze settled on Holmes, sharp as a blade. And who dares claim the name of Sherlock Holmes within these hallowed walls? Holmes's voice was steady, unwavering. "I do, and I claim it to dismantle the lies that seek to destroy me." A tense silence. Then, suddenly, from the shadows, masked figures moved to encircle us. "The Raven's justice is swift and absolute," the leader intoned. "Tonight, the truth will be unveiled, or the lies will consume us all." The circle tightened, and the flickering candlelight cast grotesque shadows across the faces behind their masks. I could feel the weight of countless eyes fixed upon us, measuring, judging, seeking weakness. Holmes's voice rang clear, unwavering amidst the murmurs. "You have woven a tale of fiction to frame me, a playwright's death to make legend of my demise. But why? What do you seek to gain by erasing me from both story and reality?" The feathered leader inclined his head slowly, his silver filigree mask catching the light. "Sherlock Holmes is more than a man. He is an idea, a threat to our design. In a world veiled in deception, his truth cuts too deeply." Evelyn's voice was sharp. "And so you hide behind your masks and shadows, silencing those who dare to speak? What lies beneath this black raven society that you fear so much?" A ripple of uneasy silence followed. Then the leader gestured, and a robed figure stepped forward, holding an ancient, leather-bound book, the same tome we had discovered in the underground chamber. "Within these pages lies the covenant of the Black Raven," he intoned, "a pact forged in blood and silence designed to steer the city's fate for the greater good." Holmes's eyes flicked over the text. "Manipulation of government, corruption at every level. You think yourself guardians, but you are jailers." The leader's voice hardened. "We are necessary. Without control, chaos reigns." I felt a cold shiver. This was more than a secret society. It was a shadow government with tentacles far beyond our initial fears. Suddenly, a harsh sound, metal scraping stone, and from the crowd, a hidden dagger flashed toward Holmes. In an instant, Holmes deflected the blow, twisting with the grace of a seasoned fighter. Enough! The tension shattered as masked figures surged forward, and the chamber erupted into chaos. I drew my revolver, firing a warning shot into the air. Stand down! We came for truth, not bloodshed. Evelyn grabbed my arm, pulling me back. This isn't a mere gathering, it's a trap. Holmes pressed forward, eyes blazing. If you seek to silence me, you will fail. The truth will come to light. Amidst the turmoil, a sudden collapse echoed through the chamber, a hidden section of the floor giving way. Dust and debris rained down as a concealed passage opened, revealing a spiral staircase leading downward. Holmes glanced toward it. This may be the heart of their secrets. Without hesitation, we descended into the darkness, the voices of the society fading behind us. As the stone steps closed above, the real game began. The air grew colder as we descended the spiral staircase, the faint echo of footsteps and muffled voices above fading into a distant hum. The walls, rough-hewn from ancient stone, bore the marks of centuries, their dampness seeping into the very marrow of the building. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a cavernous chamber, lit by flickering sconces that revealed rows of shelves laden with dusty ledgers, maps, and bundles of correspondence. The scent of must and old parchment filled the air, a vault of hidden knowledge. Holmes's eyes gleamed with intensity. Here lies their true power, the accumulated secrets, debts, and sins of London's elite. With these, they manipulate politics, law enforcement, even the press. Evelyn approached a large table where a series of documents lay scattered. Look here, correspondence between members discussing Project Eclipse. What could that mean? I bent closer to read. An operation aimed at obliterating dissent. A campaign of eradication, perhaps? Holmes's fingers traced a passage. A coordinated effort to silence anyone who threatens their dominion, including myself. A sudden noise startled us. From a shadowed alcove emerged a figure cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a hood. I see curiosity has led you far, Mr. Holmes. The voice was low, cold, but some stones are better left unturned. Holmes stepped forward without hesitation, and some shadows are meant to be chased into the light. The figure laughed softly, stepping into the torchlight. A woman, her eyes fierce and familiar. You have met the Nightingale. I am the Raven's warden. Recognition flashed across Holmes's face, tempered by resolve. So the game's final piece. She drew a slender dagger, its blade gleaming wickedly. You seek to dismantle our order. I seek to ensure its survival, by any means necessary. A deadly dance began, shadows flickering as steel met steel. Evelyn and I moved to flank her, but the warden was swift, her movements a blend of grace and lethal intent. Holmes parried, his mind racing. Watson, cover Evelyn and secure the documents. Amidst the clash, I seized a heavy ledger and shoved it into my satchel. Evelyn gathered as many papers as she could. The warden snarled, lunging again, but Holmes sidestepped, driving her back toward the chamber's edge. With a final, forceful move, Holmes disarmed her, the dagger clattering to the floor. Breathing heavily, the warden glared up at us. This is far from over, Holmes. Holmes's voice was resolute. No, it is only beginning. Your empire of lies will crumble. As sirens wailed faintly in the distance, we realized our descent had triggered alarms within the society. We gathered the stolen documents and retraced our steps, hearts pounding but spirits aflame. Outside, the fog embraced us once more, but now with a glimmer of hope that the truth, long buried in darkness, might finally see the light. Chapter 12. Shadows Unveiled. We emerged from the hidden depths beneath Temple Church into the chill of a London dawn, the city still wrapped in fog and silence. The weight of the stolen documents felt heavier than the satchels carrying them, the secrets within poised to shake the very foundations of the Black Raven Society. Holmes's gaze was fierce, his mind clearly racing through every detail. These papers are the skeleton key, Watson. Each letter reveals a thread in their vast web of corruption and control. Evelyn looked weary but determined. Yet we must tread carefully. The society's reach extends into the police, the press, even Parliament. To expose them is to invite relentless pursuit. I nodded, gripping the bundle tightly. But we have allies in unexpected places. The journalist Langley may see the truth in these documents and has the power to bring it to light. Holmes smiled grimly. Indeed, we shall need all the fire we can muster to ignite this powder keg. Back at Baker Street, we spread the documents across the table. The ink had faded in places, but the handwritten notes told a story of bribery, blackmail, and chilling expediency. Prominent figures, long thought honorable, were revealed as pawns or players in a sinister game. Hours slipped by as we cataloged the evidence. Holmes's fingers trembled slightly, not from fatigue, but from the burden of knowledge. Volum's manuscript was a warning, a fictional echo of reality meant to expose the society's cruelty. They killed him to silence that voice. Evelyn's eyes glistened, and they framed you to discredit any challenge to their power. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door startled us. Holmes motioned silently as I moved to open it. Outside stood Langley, the investigative journalist known for his unyielding pursuit of truth. His eyes widened when he saw the documents. "Holmes, this is explosive. If published, it could dismantle the society." Holmes nodded gravely. "That is our hope, but it will come at a price." Langley's expression hardened. "I'm ready for whatever comes." Together, we formed a fragile alliance, bound by the shared goal of bringing the Black Raven's dark empire into the light. Yet as the first rays of sun pierced the London sky, a cold certainty settled over us. The society would not go quietly into the dawn. The true battle was just beginning. The dawn light filtered weakly through the tall windows of Baker Street, casting long shadows across the scattered papers and open books that cluttered the room. Holmes sat at his cluttered desk, elbows resting on its worn surface, eyes scanning the fragile documents as if trying to read not just the ink, but the very souls of those who wrote them. Langley, standing by the fireplace, flicked through a thick ledger with the intensity of a man who knew a moment's distraction might cost a life. His face, usually marked by the sharp lines of a hardened reporter, softened for a moment with a spark of hope. "Mr. Holmes, if these are authentic, if they truly reveal the extent of the Black Raven's corruption, then we hold a weapon far more potent than any revolver or blade. We can strike at the heart of the beast." Holmes gave a curt nod, but his eyes never left the documents. "Yet a weapon is only as good as the hand that wields it, Langley. The society is not merely a shadow in the dark. It is a storm that will not hesitate to consume those who light a match too close." Evelyn stepped forward, folding her arms tightly as she regarded the gathered men. "What are our options? The manuscript framed Holmes for a murder staged in fiction but enacted in reality. This means their tactics include psychological warfare, manipulation of public perception." Langley set down the ledger, fixing us with a determined gaze. "The press must be our ally. If we can secure the cooperation of the major newspapers, especially those independent of the society's influence, we can begin chipping away at their public facade." Holmes raised a slender finger. "And yet, as we know too well, the society's claws reach far into the editorial offices. It will not be simple to find truly independent voices." I couldn't help but interject. "Then what of Parliament? Could some members not be convinced to act on this information?" Langley laughed, though it held little humor. "Convincing a politician to fight a secret society that controls much of London's underworld, commerce, and law enforcement is a perilous endeavor. They prefer shadows and silence to scandal." Holmes rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We must therefore strike multiple fronts: media, politics, public opinion, to fragment their power and sow distrust among their ranks." Evelyn's voice was quiet but firm. "We also need protection. The society's enforcers will be relentless now that the veil has been lifted." A shadow crossed Langley's face. "I have friends, former soldiers, men with no love for the Black Raven. They can provide discreet security, though nothing will guarantee safety entirely." Holmes looked toward the window, watching the fog lifting over the rooftops of London. "Then it is settled. We prepare our campaign carefully. We expose their deeds, but we do not underestimate their capacity for retaliation." The room seemed to pulse with the gravity of the moment. Every man and woman present understood that this was no mere battle of words, but a war waged in darkness, where lives hung in the balance. Over the next days, Baker Street became a hive of activity. Holmes, Evelyn, Langley, and I worked feverishly, poring over the stolen documents, deciphering codes, and cross-referencing names. Holmes's uncanny eye spotted inconsistencies, forged signatures, and hidden correspondences that would have fooled any but the keenest intellect. Evelyn reached out discreetly to trusted contacts in the theatrical and literary circles. seeking to spread subtle warnings and test the waters for public sympathy. Langley began drafting articles, carefully veiled at first, hinting at the corruption festering behind London's polished veneer. Yet even as our plans took shape, the menace of the Black Raven Society lurked ever closer. Strange figures shadowed our steps. Letters bearing ominous threats slipped beneath our doors. The air grew thick with unease. One evening, as the gas lamps sputtered to life outside, a sharp rap echoed through the street-level door of Baker Street. Holmes exchanged a knowing glance with Evelyn before motioning me to answer. I opened the door to reveal a courier, a young woman wrapped in a cloak, her eyes darting nervously. She handed me a sealed envelope, then vanished into the fog before I could speak. Holmes broke the seal with meticulous care. Inside, a single sheet bore a chilling message in elegant script. Cease your inquiries, or the final act will claim more than your reputation. The Raven watches. A silence fell upon the room as the weight of the threat settled over us. Holmes's voice was steady, but I caught the steely edge beneath. They believe intimidation will stop us. It will only strengthen our resolve. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. Then we must move faster, before they can strike again. Langley nodded grimly. I will accelerate the publication. The public must know. In the days that followed, the tension was palpable. Holmes took to late-night vigils, eyes sharp for any sign of intrusion. Evelyn's contacts warned of increased surveillance and the sudden disappearance of several known associates. Langley coordinated with underground presses, preparing to release exposés that would shake London's establishment. One evening, Holmes summoned me to his study with an urgent expression. Watson, I have reason to believe a mole exists among our allies, a traitor feeding information to the society. My heart sank. Among us? But who? Holmes laid out the evidence, subtle inconsistencies in messages, odd delays, and unexplained betrayals. We must be cautious with whom we trust. Even the smallest crack can bring down the entire edifice. Our circle tightened, and suspicion clouded every interaction. Yet our mission was clear. Expose the Black Raven, dismantle their empire, and clear Holmes's name. Then came the night of the first publication. Langley's articles hit the streets like lightning. Headlines that hinted at shadowy conspiracies, the dangerous influence of secret societies, and the mysterious murder of Valum with the shadow of Holmes cast over it. The public was captivated. Whispers spread in smoky taverns and gilded drawing rooms alike. But with the light came darkness. Within hours, Baker Street was besieged. Black-clad figures loomed outside our windows, threats were scrawled in charcoal on our doorsteps, and a sinister note was pinned to the lamppost across the street. You play with fire, detective. Beware the Raven's flight. Holmes, Evelyn, Langley, and I stood together in the flickering lamplight, the city's pulse thrumming around us. Holmes's jaw was set. The web tightens, but so shall our grasp. This is no longer a game of shadows. It is a battle for the soul of London itself. And so, amid threats and whispers, betrayals and alliances, we prepared for the storm that was to come, one that would test the very limits of our courage, wit, and endurance. For the Black Raven had not yet shown its full talons. Chapter 13. The Gathering Storm. The heavy fog that clung to London's streets had thickened into a persistent drizzle, as if the city itself mourned the approaching tempest. The gas lamps flickered uncertainly against the gloom, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance with unseen menace. From the window of Baker Street, I watched the restless city below, its restless heartbeat growing louder as the secrets we unearthed began to ripple through its dark underbelly. Holmes sat across from me at the cluttered desk, fingers steepled beneath his sharp chin, eyes alight with a fervor that belied the calmness of his voice. The Black Raven Society's grip tightens, he said quietly. Their influence is a hydra. Cut off one head and two more rise in its place. But every creature has a weakness. Evelyn stood by the fireplace, her gaze distant yet resolute. We've roused the city's most dangerous shadows, Holmes. The manuscript, Valum's murder, the exposés. They've united allies and enemies alike. But can we truly trust those who offer their allegiance now? Langley, who had arrived moments before, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Trust is a rare commodity in our world, but the public's thirst for truth grows daily. The society's clandestine control over the press is fraying. They cannot silence every voice forever. Holmes nodded, rising and pacing the room. The final act will not be played in daylight. We must delve into the shadows, into the heart of their operations. I asked, where do we begin? We have their documents, their threats. But what of their true leader? The warden called herself the Raven's Warden, who truly commands this web. Holmes paused before the window, staring into the swirling mists. The head of the Black Raven is elusive, a phantom even to many of its own. But all power flows through the Old Bailey, a fortress of law and secrets. It is there we must strike. Evelyn's eyes widened. The Old Bailey? The very seat of justice corrupted by the Society's hand? Exactly, Holmes replied. The Society has embedded itself in every facet: judges, clerks, barristers, even the jailers. To dismantle them, we must expose their stronghold and sever their command. Langley's face hardened. That will require more than just evidence. It will require allies in high places and precise timing. Any misstep, and we risk losing everything. The room fell into a charged silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, a steady reminder of time running out. Holmes resumed pacing. We have one advantage. The manuscript Vollum wrote, which names me as the killer in a fabricated murder. Its chilling accuracy, unfortunately, suggests insider knowledge of our tactics. Someone among us is closer to the truth and closer to betrayal than we imagined. I looked at Evelyn, whose steady gaze did not waver. Can we root out the traitor before they strike again? Holmes's voice grew grim. We must, for if the Society destroys our alliance from within, the city will drown in darkness. Langley stepped forward, pulling from his coat a bundle of letters, carefully intercepted correspondences between the Society's members. These show a planned gathering at Temple Church tonight, a conclave where the Society's leaders will convene to decide our fate. Evelyn clenched her fists. Then we must be there. It is our last chance to confront them before they strike. Holmes fixed each of us with a piercing stare. Tonight, the shadows will fall away, and the truth must be faced. We enter their lair armed not just with words, but with resolve. As the rain intensified, pounding against the windows like a herald of the coming storm, I felt the weight of the moment settle upon us. The lines between friend and foe blurred. The city's fate balanced precariously on a knife's edge. The man who killed Sherlock Holmes was not just a figment of fiction anymore. He was waiting in the shadows. And so were we. The hour grew late, and the fog thickened outside, as if to cloak the city in secrecy. Holmes moved with his customary precision, gathering his tools, his magnifying glass, a well-worn notebook, and his trusty revolver, while Evelyn and Langley prepared their own weapons and notes. I felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on my shoulders. The air in Baker Street was taut, like the string of a bow pulled tight, ready to release its deadly arrow. Before we leave, Holmes said, turning to us, there is one last matter to address. The traitor in our midst. I have traced subtle signs. Footprints in our plans, whisperings not meant for our ears. Someone has been feeding the Black Raven information. Evelyn's face hardened. Then tonight, we not only confront the Society, we root out the serpent in our midst. Langley's jaw clenched. Trust will be our most fragile weapon. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Precisely. We must watch each other carefully. A single misstep, and all is lost. The streets of London were slick with rain as we made our way toward Temple Church, the place where shadows conspired and secrets were forged. The church's spires pierced the fog, silent sentinels guarding a conspiracy that stretched deeper than any of us had dared imagine. Approaching the heavy oak doors, Holmes motioned us forward with a swift, silent gesture. Stay close and be vigilant. The Society will expect us. Inside, the cavernous space was dimly lit by candles, their flames trembling as if anticipating the storm to come. Figures cloaked in black gathered silently, their masked faces turned toward us with chilling calm. The leader, the Raven's Warden, stood at the center, her silver mask reflecting the candlelight with a cold glint. She stepped forward, voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. Detective Holmes, we have been expecting you. Holmes's gaze met hers steadily. So the final act begins. Reveal yourself and your purpose. The warden's smile was a blade's edge. Purpose? To preserve order, to eliminate chaos. You threaten that order, Holmes, with your meddling and your revelations. Evelyn stepped forward, voice unwavering. Order maintained through murder and deceit is no order at all. We will expose you." A murmur rippled through the crowd, tension snapping like a drawn wire. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a man known to us but now stripped of trust. The traitor. His eyes flickered with guilt and fear. Holmes's voice cut through the tension. "Betrayal lies not just in actions but in silence. Tell us, why?" The traitor's confession spilled forth, a tale of fear, coercion, and lost loyalty. His role in leaking our plans had been meant to protect loved ones held hostage by the society. The chamber erupted into chaos as members lunged forward, daggers flashing. Holmes, Evelyn, Langley, and I moved as one, fighting, dodging, and seizing the moment. In the maelstrom, Holmes and the warden faced off, steel clashing in a deadly dance of wills. "Your empire ends tonight," Holmes declared, disarming her with a swift strike. The remaining conspirators faltered as police sirens wailed in the distance. Langley had summoned reinforcements. With the society's leaders arrested and their secrets laid bare, London breathed anew, the fog lifting to reveal a city reborn. Holmes stood among us, bruised but unbroken. The man who killed Sherlock Holmes was never real, but the forces that sought to destroy him, and all he stood for, were very real indeed. As dawn broke over the Thames, I knew this was not the end, but a new beginning. For in the heart of London, shadows always lurk, and it is the light we bring that keeps them at bay. Chapter 14, The Last Curtain. The city was waking slowly from its long, oppressive nightmare. The fog that had once wrapped London in a suffocating shroud now lifted, revealing streets washed clean by the morning rain. Yet beneath the brightening skies, a stillness lingered, a fragile quiet born from the collapse of a shadowy empire. From the window of Baker Street, I observed the world anew, the Thames shimmering softly under the pale dawn. Holmes stood beside me, his gaze distant but resolute, as if already piecing together the future from the remnants of the past. "The Black Raven Society is shattered," Holmes said quietly, breaking the silence. "But their venom persists in the undercurrents of this city. We have won a battle, Watson, but the war against darkness is eternal." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within me. "What now, Holmes? How do we move forward from this, when your very name was once stained by fiction turned reality?" Holmes turned, a rare softness in his eyes. "We rebuild trust, illuminate truth, and remind London that even the darkest plots unravel beneath the light of reason, and I shall continue to serve that cause, no matter the cost." Evelyn entered the room, a letter in hand, her expression a mixture of hope and fatigue. "Langley's exposés have stirred the city. Public outcry demands reform. Parliament is in uproar, and arrests ripple through the corridors of power." Holmes allowed himself a brief smile. "Justice, at last. Though imperfect, it is a beacon." I exhaled deeply, the tension of months beginning to ease. "And Vollum? His name? His legacy?" Holmes's gaze darkened briefly. He paid the ultimate price for a truth many feared. But his story, twisted though it was, sparked the flame that will not be extinguished. The room fell silent again, the calm before whatever new storm might come. Outside, the streets of London stirred with life, a city reborn from shadows. And as always, somewhere in the distance, a mystery awaited. But for now, the curtain had fallen on this dark chapter, and the man called Sherlock Holmes stood once more in the light. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Langley's articles flooded the morning papers, their bold headlines proclaiming the downfall of the Black Raven Society and the exposure of its insidious reach into the heart of London's institutions. The city buzzed with outrage and relief in equal measure, the populace eager to grasp at the hope of a cleaner, safer future. Holmes, ever the vigilant sentinel, remained at Baker Street, poring over the final pieces of evidence, notes, confessions, and correspondence, ensuring that no thread was left untied. His keen mind sought not just to close the case, but to understand the deeper currents that had allowed such darkness to flourish. Evelyn joined us in the study, her eyes bright despite the fatigue etched on her face. "The theater world has rallied behind us, Holmes. The public's imagination, once swayed by fear and fiction, now turns toward truth. Vollum's work, though manipulated, has become a catalyst for change." Holmes gave a rare nod of approval. The pen, no less than the sword, can indeed alter the course of history. I watched him, struck by the paradox of the man who had been at the center of a fictional death that threatened to become all too real. The manuscript that had almost been his undoing now served as a testament to the power of stories and the dangers they might conceal. "Do you think the danger has passed?" I asked quietly. Holmes's gaze lifted to meet mine, sharp and unwavering. "Danger is never absent from the shadows, Watson, but knowledge is our shield and vigilance our sword. As long as we remain steadfast, the darkness cannot claim the light." Langley, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "The public wants heroes now, Holmes. You, Evelyn, even I. But the truth is more complex than tales of good and evil. The society's downfall reminds us that corruption can thrive anywhere, even in those sworn to protect." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Which is why the fight continues. Not just against secret cabals, but against complacency and silence." A silence fell over us then, heavy with unspoken understanding. We had toppled a great beast, but the city's veins still pulsed with untold stories, half-hidden threats, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. Holmes stood and approached the window again, watching the waking city. "I shall resume my work, not as a phantom in stories, but as a living guardian of justice. And I trust, Watson, that you will continue to chronicle our endeavors, shining light where darkness dwells." I felt a surge of pride and purpose. "Always, Holmes. Together." As the morning sun broke fully over London, casting golden rays through the now clear skies, I understood that though the chapter had closed, the story would never truly end. For in every whispered secret, in every shadowed corner, there awaited a mystery, and a man ready to unravel it. The legend of Sherlock Holmes lived on. Epilogue. The years that followed unfolded like the turning pages of a well-worn tome. The Black Raven Society became a cautionary tale whispered in London's smoky taverns and debated in the halls of justice. Parliament enacted reforms to cleanse the rot exposed by Langley's fearless reporting, and the city breathed more freely, if only for a time. Sherlock Holmes resumed his quiet, relentless vigilance, a sentinel against the ever-present threats lurking beneath polite society's veneer. I continued to record his exploits, but each case a testament not only to his unparalleled intellect, but to his unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Yet, beneath the triumph and restoration, I knew shadows remained. The manuscript that had once cast a sinister pall over Holmes's name was now a symbol, a reminder that fiction and reality often dance dangerously close, and that the greatest mysteries sometimes lie not in crime, but in the fragile balance between perception and truth. Evelyn and Langley, once allies in a desperate struggle, found their own paths toward redemption and purpose. Our alliance, forged in the crucible of intrigue, endured beyond the immediate danger, bound by shared conviction and respect. As I sit by the fire in Baker Street, pen poised over paper, I find myself pondering the enigmatic man whose life and legend I have chronicled. Holmes, with his piercing gaze and restless mind, remains ever the paradox, part myth, part mortal, a man whose very existence challenges the line between the imagined and the real. The city outside hums with life, its secrets forever shifting beneath the surface. And somewhere in the distance, a new mystery stirs, waiting to be unraveled. For as long as darkness threatens, there will be those who stand against it, and stories yet to be told. And so, the final curtain falls not in silence, but in anticipation. The game, as always, is afoot. Thank you so much for listening to our Honoring Audiobooks original Sherlock Holmes adventure. We hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to leave a comment letting us know which story you'd like to hear next and where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our detective fans around the world. See you in the next adventure.